In this upcoming season now, with where we are, how important do you feel that backup center position is for the Sixers?
Well, it'll always carry a level of importance in the regular season. My position has long been that their struggles in the playoffs, specifically when Joel hits the bench, are less about having this specific center on the floor and more about the lineups altogether not being good enough to either win or at least, hold the fort down in those minutes. Some of that is not having a good enough third, maybe fourth guy, right? Like I think we're now at the point where all of us believe in Tyrese Maxey, second option, guy who's going to run the show when Joel Embiid hits the bench, right? Like I think we all feel pretty confident about that. But he's going to need guys to help him there. It can't just be Tyrese go out and score every possession or we don't have a plan. There does need to be some form of secondary creation, secondary offense. You need to be able to build a credible defense, I think just as importantly, without Joel Embiid, because so much of the team's identity on that end of the floor is tied into how good Joel is as a rim protector, how successful he can be in drop coverage. And so I am willing to entertain the idea that you use pick 16 on a big. I actually like some of these guys we're going to talk about today, which if you guys have listened to the last couple of shows, there are a lot of these players that I just don't think really make sense for the Sixers. But I think Derek probably feels even stronger on the idea of like, if you're going to take a big, just trade the pick or do something else, because he doesn't value the backup center for Joel all that much on a general level. And I do think like overarching idea is that if Joel is hurt, when Joel is hurt, you're kind of screwed anyway. And so I don't want to invest too much in a guy who's just going to play when you really have little hope anyway.
Yeah. So I think conceptually, like not in the Sixers specific instance, I would be okay with drafting a number of these players and being like, all right, maybe this will lock down your backup center for a 4-year stretch at a low salary, and you don't have to worry about it. Especially if you then bring back, like, let's say one of the guys in Edey, you bring back, Paul Reed. You now have two very different stylistic backup centers, depending on the matchup, depending on your needs. You could throw either one of them out there. I think that can be, I think there can be a conversation for that. My concern is where the Sixers sit, particularly where the Sixers sit with the salary cap. Like we've mentioned a bunch, you have that, $49 million slot to, we'll just call it Paul George right now, just filling in a name. Who knows what will happen. But after that, you have then a $15 million slot after that in terms of cap space. If you keep this pick, that's down to $11 million in cap space. That's less buying power than the mid-level exception. I think that is a pretty significant drop in the kind of free agents you can try to attract. And because of that, this player that you draft, if you draft someone at 16 and you eat into that cap space and you get below the mid-level because of it, they have to be able to play more than 10 to 12 minutes per game, and they have to be able to play in the playoffs right now. And none of these guys, as good as they are, either they can't play next to Joel Embiid, or you can't necessarily look at them and say, all right, well, our backup center solution is solved. No matter how polished they are, no matter what skill sets they have, that's a tough ask for a big man to come into the NBA and be effective, especially defensively, especially in the playoffs. So if you're not going to be able to do that, and you can't project a role alongside Embiid long-term, then I don't really have much interest in rostering a center with the 16th pick. Like I said, it's one thing if we were talking about someone like Bub, who we talked about yesterday, and you can say like, all right, well, in 2 to 3 years, he might be able to grow. He might be able to play alongside Tyrese Maxey. He might be able to give you some on-ball, off-ball equity. Sure, I can talk myself into eating into my cap space for something like that. But for a big man who I never project will be able to play next to Joel Embiid, who I never project will be able to play more than 10 to 12 minutes because of that, and who I can't slot into a backup or into a playoff rotation right now, it's tough for me to then say, yes, I'm going to buy into that with limited upside, no guarantee of the current, and also while doing that, eat into my cap space this summer, which I need not for a player to play 10 minutes per game, but hopefully for a player to play 30 to 35 minutes per game and be a starter, because right now you've got 2 players in Embiid and Maxey and Ricky Council on your roster, and that's pretty much it. People will make the argument that, no, you have to solve this. You have to get a backup center. Backup center is a need. Yeah, it's a need. So are 3 starting slots. So I can't limit what I can do to fill those 3 slots just because you also have need at backup center.
We all silly like the mayor.